But I think that everybody needs a voice to a degree, and social media platforms are now the most important platforms on the planet. They control information and they influence real-world decisions, and they influence people's perception of reality. The last few years of COVID have been a perfect example of what happens when you censor one side of the argument and you only allow one point of view to be purported by the matrix in and of itself, and that's how you end up in tyrannical situations. I think you were just discussing that, Piers.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfectly valid point. You know, people have quite rightly held me to task over some of the positions I took during the COVID pandemic, notably when the scientists said as a definitive fact that you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine. It turned out that wasn't true. And I based my observations on that supposed fact and said, right, well, in that case, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you shouldn't get the same rights as people who've been vaccinated. If it's true that if you're unjabbed, you can pass it on. It turned out, actually, there's not much difference whether you've been vaccinated or not. And at that point, I changed my mind. But I felt that there were a lot of people who were being deplatformed from Twitter at the time for questioning the validity of scientific statements, and they would then be a complete U-turn. So I do think it was a very interesting period, actually, for testing what free speech means.
It was actually worse than that. You're right, Piers, but it was actually worse than interesting, because what happens is when you censor an entire side of the argument and only allowed one side of the argument to have a voice, you are changing reality in real time. You are shaping the world. The only reason that scam continued as long as it did, and the only reason people didn't get to see their own parents get buried, and the only reason people sat and missed cancer appointments because they were scared of the common cold, was because they were censoring anybody who said anything contrary to the purported version of events that the mainstream media decided they want the entire world to swallow. It's beyond simply interesting, and it's beyond simply funny or coincidental.
Yeah, I will challenge you on one thing. It's not the common cold, right? COVID-19 has killed 6.6 million people. It is one of the most deadly viruses, certainly of our lifetime. So it wasn't the common cold, but I do think it is completely justified for people to say we should be more cautious, I think, about accepting during fast-moving pandemics the word of scientists as being sacrosanct, because on a number of things, from the use of masks to the efficacy of vaccines in preventing transmission, they did massive U-turns.
I've read enough history books to know that the people who do the censoring are never the good guys. And they've been censoring a lot of arguments for a very long time in the name of good. They are weaponizing virtue, and it's always in the name of tyranny. Anybody who is out here trying to silence an entire side of an argument on any subject, whether it's COVID-19, immigration, anything else, they are the evil people who are out for absolute mind control of the populace. And they should be feared.